Hi guys, hey, welcome back. I think we've got a really interesting task to do today. Maybe I should have done it way before now. We're already well into the middle of our course and we haven't yet translated the name of your degree program. I want to think about translating Management Sozialer Dienstleistungen together with you today. And it's a trickier task than you might think. It's going to take 2 videos, not 1. So let's jump in. Maybe it's nice to actually start with this question of why it's maybe tricky to translate your degree program title. So discuss with your partner, is it easy to translate the titles of our degree? Is it an easy task? Why might it be easy or why not? Scratch your heads together and think about it. See what you can come up with. Pause here. What did you come up with? I think that degree titles can be hard to translate. If, for example, the field or course is new and innovative. Medicine and philosophy are not new and therefore they're quite easy to translate. Other degree titles may be somehow a more modern thing, something that we haven't been studying for so long, and that's going to make it trickier to translate. If the field of training is interdisciplinary or diffuse, and I'm an expert on this point because I'm a social worker and we're amazingly interdisciplinary, we're amazingly diffuse, and that actually made it quite harmful for us to create a professional identity in the early years of our profession. So that second point is also something that I can relate to. Finally, if the title has terms which are ambiguous in the source language, sometimes a degree title is unclear in the language in which it's written. It's worth checking through these 3 points with our program, Management Sozialer Dienstleistungen. Is it new? Yes, it is. It's also innovative. I was about when the first cohort came, and in the accreditation, we were praised for our innovation. Our degree back then was quite unique in Germany. Now, there are others that are copying us. So that's interesting. We were the first to do something new. But again, that maybe makes our title conceptually harder to translate. Second point, are we interdisciplinary? Are we a bit diffuse? Yes, we are. We have to be. That's how it is. We accept that fact. You guys do, a bit of management. You do a bit of social work and social care. You have the option to do areas like gerontology as well. So it's fantastically rich in terms of being interdisciplinary. And finally, if you speak to an uncle or a friend or a potential employer and say that you're studying Management Sozialer Dienstleistungen, they might know exactly what you mean, but they might not. The term may be a little bit ambiguous in the source language. So we're expecting the translation to be challenging even before we start. Next question, we're going to be translating. What's our criteria for a successful translation? What do you think our criteria are for a good translation of Management Sozialer Dienstleistungen, BA? Pause here and think about that question. As you can see, I was keen to rush into the answer. Ideally, well, I've got something like 4 criteria. The first one, in a general sense, it should be authentic. What's an example of authenticity? Well, how about having a real translation? A translation which corresponds to some kind of bachelor's program somewhere in the English-speaking world. That'd be lovely, wouldn't it? It should correspond to language used in our literature. Degree titles typically have titles which you can also find on book covers. So it should be a term that the experts use in the literature. Finally, to be strict in terms of content, it should match your BA curriculum. You could see what modules do I do, and does this title include all of that? So those are my 4 criteria: authenticity, realness, is it in our literature, does it match the content of your learning? Now, I could say, hey guys, I'm making a big thing out of this, but couldn't we just be a little bit lazy? Google Translate, great program on the internet, you can access it free of charge, type in your word, it translates it for you. Couldn't we do that? And then go off for an early lunch, maybe with a beer as well. It's not a bad idea, is it? Come on, guys, let's take the afternoon off. Let's spare ourselves the work. What do you think? This question isn't a stupid question. It's always good to ask, could I do something in a more effective and efficient way? Could I save myself some time and still get to the same result? So what do you think? What are the advantages or disadvantages of using Google Translate here? Have a natter with your partner. I guess your response is best tested once you've actually tried it. I'm hoping that some of you did try it. If you didn't, you can try it now, actually. A fun test type into Google Translate, type the following words: English in sozialen Einrichtungen. It's the title of this module, of course. So you're typing that into Google Translate. What comes out? And this is really, really funny. It translates whilst you type. What happens? Were you surprised? It translates whilst you type. Isn't that fascinating? So you're typing in English, and then it gives you English, and then you type in, and it gives you in. Then you type in social, and it knows you want to say social. So it happens, it's almost as if the machine is thinking with you. But then something really disappointing happens. It gets the last word wrong, making the whole translation completely pointless. It gives you English in social institutions. Duh. That's not anything that any native speaker would say. So it's exciting at first, but then it's a little bit disappointing. What's Google Translate useful for? You don't speak much Spanish, but you want to buy a pair of trainers from a Spanish website. You know, it'll really help you. It's very good for these rough and ready language tasks. It will give you the important points. It will give you the gist of what's being written there. What isn't it useful for currently in 2020 is nuanced, fine translations for use by experts. Maybe in 20 or 30 years' time it will be, but at this point in history, to use software translating, usually you have to have a human being to actually bash the text into a translatable form first, then you put it into the translation machine, and then when you get it out, maybe you have to bash it up a little bit after. So yeah, machines can help us, but we need human beings as well. It is worth noting, at this point in history, Google Translate often gives us Denglish, which is exactly what we got in our module title here. So we're being a little bit skeptical with that, although it's fun to check. Good. Again, so jumping into this translation now, what are we looking for? Just reminding ourselves of the criteria, ideally an equivalent program elsewhere in the English-speaking world. That's our main criteria, that's our goal, it's our holy grail. So it brings us to the next question. What do you guys actually learn studying here in Fechter? You know, what are we teaching you guys? What do you learn? How do you describe your program to someone outside of Fechter? Pause here, think about that with your partner. What did you come up with? What did we study? I mean, I would summarize it in my own words: how to do management jobs. We're training you for management jobs, not all management jobs. We're specializing in organizations working in the broad area of the social. That's my ad hoc definition, although it's just a personal thing. It's not necessarily authoritative. Good. Interesting question for translators. What's the boundaries of this? What's the boundaries of this? You know, we say social, but what does that mean? How strictly social are we going to be? Are you taught how to run organizations in the broad sense of the word social? You know, is there anything that could be described as a social service? Or is it somehow more restricted? You know, what about hospitals, for example? What about universities? What about prisons, for example? You know, are these included? This is a valid question. Maybe it's nice to find an answer which is weighty. Simply be lazy. To answer that question, have a look at the university website. Look at this. Soziale Dienstleistungen umfassen ein breites Spektrum an sozialen, pädagogischen, erzieherischen, gesundheitlichen und pflegerischen Maßnahmen, die von öffentlichen, freigewerblichen und freigemeinnützigen Anbietern bereitgestellt werden. So I'm struggling with the German there, but I got through it. Whew, your language is hard. But it really answers our question, doesn't it? You know, not as precise as we may wish, but as a good first approximate answer, it is quite broad. It is quite broad. More details can be found by looking at the modules. And if you really want to be precise, you can really see the boundaries of our degree by comparing it to other university programs. So if you study Pflegemanagement bachelors, I think you can do that, say, in Osnabrück, there they really will have modules using the idea of the hospital, okay? That's not, as far as I know, in our studies. So, you know, we're going into those particular specialist areas more if we choose one of those other degrees. And again, Schul- and Bildungsmanagement, you can do it in Potsdam. You know, it really would be related to educational places, schools, universities. When I see pädagogisch erzieherisch, I'm thinking more of, say, a kindergarten than a secondary school. So we're seeing now the boundaries of what we do. We're getting a more precise picture of what it is that you're being trained for in Fechter. Good. I want to move on now. A really important point here, thinking about our criteria for translating. What is your program called? What is your program not called? We can assume that the choice of your title was done by experts making rational decisions. So we know in passing, really important, your degree isn't called the following. Your degree is not called, although it could have been, your degree is not called Sozial Management. Could have been, but it isn't. Your degree is not called Sozialwirtschaft. Could have been, but it isn't. And your degree is not called NPO Management. Could have been, but it isn't. So we hold on to that idea. Our faculty experts didn't choose these terms, presumably for good reasons. For example, curriculum. For example, teaching staff profiles. So that's a really, really important point to hold on to. Your degree has a title, and it's not these titles here, which in a sense is actually quite a pity. Because our experts didn't use the equivalent German expressions, the following English expressions are kind of out of bounds for us. We're not allowed to touch them. Do you know what I mean? Because the German titles weren't chosen, neither can we choose their English equivalents. Sozialer Management is a bit like social work management. That's out of bounds. Yes, obviously, it's not ideal. You can see why, of course, that's too narrow. Similarly, it's not Sozialwirtschaft, so we can't really say management for social enterprise. Pity, it's a nice concept, but it's not what you guys are learning. And finally, NPO management, we didn't choose that, again, for good reasons, because it's not just these NPOs. And that's why we can't use third sector management. That's the English translation of NPO. So yeah, a little bit frustrating. Look at those book covers, which I'm flashing up there. There's this interesting literature. Get those books out, and they are relevant to you, but they're not the whole of your course of studies. Hey, as you can see, I'm in the middle of a tricky task here. The middle of a tricky task, but we're kind of orientating ourselves. We've taken the first steps now. I'm going to come to a close here. Thanks for watching, guys, and log into the second one as well. Check out my second video, which continues all of this. Thanks.